This is the episode 4 of book series. If you don't know what book series is, it's basically a series where I review all of the books that I've read or I read. And today on the list, I have The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz. And if I will give like a general sort of like an overview of this book, it is kind of like a book of mindset on how to it is literally what the title says. It's like how to think big, but with some exceptions, because the thing is, it's like what I found throughout just like reading self-improvement books is that there is a certain kind of like a type of book. There is a certain like type of, even I would say, writing that was prominent in somewhat like the 19, let's just say from the 1930s to like, I don't know, 1980s, let's just say like that, where all of the self-improvement books, first of all, they were almost all of them were on mindset. And the second thing with them was that they were written in a very certain kind of way where sometimes they even sound like woo woo motivation. It's like it's hard to explain, but if you have read if you have read Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, you will understand what I mean. It's like those books are all written in the same way where the title says one thing, and then the kind of like the author, he just digests the whole idea into many different categories and life domains and etc etc. And this is how this book is written. And this is going to be a very unusual episode of book series, because I'm not going to like go through the all of like the chapters and like the, I don't know, the all of the shit in this book. I no. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a, I wouldn't say a brief, I don't know, will it be brief, but I'm going to give you a summary of lessons and certain things that I've implemented in my life and things that I've just learned from this book. Because there are a couple. I've read this book in a time where like I needed it the most. Because when I've read it, I read it like, I don't know, 2 weeks before or something like that. 2 weeks before I was slowly kind of started to get down, just like kind of like cram down into this like self-improvement rut back again, where I was just like falling off of some habits. I wasn't as positive as I was before. I was kind of like starting to create this like negative attitude, etc etc etc. And this book kind of helped me to, first of all, realize that. And the second thing is just to basically cure it before it started to produce metamorphosis. Like, this is, yeah, this was a good time to read this book, certainly. And I learned quite a few lessons from this book, and I'm going to start with, it's like straight with the first lesson that I've learned from this book, and it is probably one of the most important mental models that you can have, and it is the Mr. Triumph and Mr. Defeat mindset. So, what is the Mr. Triumph and Mr. Defeat mindset? In your brain, you have a kind of like two legacy channels of thoughts. And the first one is the Mr. Triumph. And if anything in life happens, like any situation, Mr. Triumph is the guy who is going to make the most out of it. He's going to like think positively, think growth, think like he's going to be the guy who thinks positively. So this is the positive channel in your brain. And then there is the Mr. Defeat channel. And this guy will, of course, be the cynic. He's going to be the nihilistic guy. He's going to think negatively. He's going to have a bad attitude towards things, etc., etc. So when you have two of those channels in your brain, the one thing is that you can basically manage those. So what I mean right here is that if you consciously or even unconsciously let your Mr. Defeat part of your brain talk more than the Mr. Triumph part of your brain, the thing is that the Mr. Defeat part, it develops. It becomes more strong. It becomes more strong. It's like it just basically makes up the most part of your thought pattern. And there is a very there is a not good existence. That is like pretty like terrible existence where your thought patterns are dominated by negative thoughts. And I have lived like that. I have lived where even though I was on self improvement, even though I was the guy who was like living a great life, I had all of the like accolades and all of the shit, and I was meditating every single day, and I was journaling, and I was doing all of the mental health habits. My brain was just chattering shit all of the time, and this chattering was negative. It's like I would do something, and instantly I would go into this like not even self-reflective mode, because this wasn't self-reflection. This was just like, as I said, chattering shit. And my brain would just like go nuts about some little mistake that I would make. And even though I would consciously try to stop the chattering in my brain, it's like it would go on. This is a pretty hard concept to explain to somebody who doesn't have that, I would say, personality and character as me, because like I'm by definition like I'm by nature, I'm a pretty anxious person. I'm like, my thought patterns are mostly negative. Not right now. Right now I think I've cured this problem, but before, like even a couple of months ago, the the existence of mine, it's like sometimes it would be terrible. It's like, yeah, I had all of the things. I had the six pack, and I had I don't know, the good habits, and like I was supposed to be like grateful for my life because I had nothing bad in it. But just because I have let myself think in those negative channels, my brain has been dominated with negative thoughts, and hence why it's like you can think that you can overcome negative emotions. Like that's pretty hard. That's pretty hard. It's like if you feel like shit for at least couple of months, you can talk about like not feeling emotions and being aloof and stoic and all of this stuff. It's like if you have if your mind has been dominated by negative emotions for the last couple of months, it's like you know that existence is miserable. You know that like you don't want to live this life. So this is a lesson that I've learned just throughout living life, and it is that not feeling your emotions and not understanding where they come from is probably one of the most false lies that have been sold to like the general public, and especially to young men these days. It's like, here's the thing. Emotions, it's kind of like feeling emotions is a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, society has told young men that they should be emotional, that they should be like that they should feel more emotions than basically they should. And when they tell you that you should feel more emotions, that you should be more emotional and all of this stuff, it's like, do you think that they mean positive emotions? Do you think that they like actually want you to experience life in a very positive way? It's like, of course not. When somebody tells you that you should be more emotional, it's like you can be 100% sure that they mean being more identifying with more of the sad feelings and melancholic and depressed and etc. It's like if somebody tells you that you should be more emotional, most likely that they're referring to this part of your emotional spectrum. And of course, if you even like consciously try to think about it, it's like it's bullshit. It's like why would you try to feel more negative emotions? Like, you know, the human brain is wired in a very negative way. We're supposed to think negatively. This is the one thing that David Schwartz in his book, he got it pretty wrong, and he got it wrong just basically I think from the time where when he wrote it, because I'm not like a scientist or like a neuro, you get the point, like I'm not this guy, and I haven't read the research in like the 1960s when this book was published, but I think for sure and kind of believe that in the 1960s there were no studies that explained why the human brain is by definition wired negatively. And the reason is like when your hunter-gatherer ancestors needed to hunt for food, it's like they weren't thinking positively. The only thing that they cared about was killing that, I don't know, that boar and not dying tomorrow because of starvation. It's like if you if that is the only thought that you have in your brain, and that is a pretty negative thought to have, it's like you either kill that boar, kill that animal, or you die. It's like it's a pretty negative thought by its nature. You're not going to have like a good, I don't know, mental health or like any good emotional balance just simply because your goals are pretty different. Your goals are not aligned with your mental health. But because our hunter-gatherer ancestors, and not only our hunter-gatherer, but also like our more recent ancestors have been pretty negative, this DNA of negative thinking has been passed onto our generations. And of course, like right now you don't have to think about survey, like if you're watching this video you don't have to think about starvation. It's like that, I'm pretty certain about that. And David Schwartz in his book told that your brain wants to think positively. It wants to think in this like positive, happy, cheerful, joyful way where you have basically no negative thoughts. And that is just a false thing. It's like, no, your brain is by definition pretty negative. And to rewire and to rewrite the unconscious mechanisms by which your brain operates, especially in those emotional patterns, it's a pretty hard thing to do. And yes, like currently I'm reading the book which is called The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. And this guy, Naval Ravikant, he basically has this quote that happiness is a choice. And what he means by that is if you basically make a choice to be happy, if you make a choice not to be sad and depressed all of the time, because like if you and me were to be honest right now, it's like being sad, it is somewhat of a it is a very marketable feeling, because often what I see in the modern world is that the feeling of sadness is often akin to the feeling of being smart. It's hard to explain, but if you know what I'm saying right now, you will have this aha moment. Because look, happy people, the feeling of being happy, it is on one hand it is a very marketable feeling because like everybody wants to feel happy. But on the other hand, it's like it's pretty difficult to achieve. So feeling sad, if you can manage to make that feeling more, I wouldn't say desirable, but more, as I said before, more marketable, you can basically cope with your existence. And the way you can make this sad feeling more marketable is by making it look smart. Because all of the sad, melancholic, depressed people, in this modern world, they're portrayed as more intellectual, as they're portrayed as more intellectually superb, as happy people. You know what I'm talking about right here, because like you if you have just basically seen the culture of the last 15 years, depressed people are always portrayed as the more intelligent ones. Yes, they're more neurotic, and they're more likely to commit suicide, and etc etc, but by definition, in the modern world, they're seen as more intelligent, which is it is like it is just a cope. It is honestly just a cope. And trying to cope with negative feelings and not trying to make your life a little bit more happy. See, it's like, it's a pretty weird choice. It's a pretty weird choice. Like, you have, in order to be happy, sometimes you've got to be proactive. It's like, this is the thing to do. But this is what some people, not some people, this is what most people won't do. They won't be proactive. They won't make a choice to actually live a somewhat of a happy life. And instead, they're going to just justify their feelings of misery and their feelings of depression. And the way they're going to do that is by making those feelings more marketable. And if those feelings are more marketable, it's like it is easier to sell those feelings to our people. And when you sell those cynical, negative, nihilistic beliefs and thoughts and emotions to our people, it's like I wouldn't say you're evil by your nature, because like maybe you're doing this unconsciously, but you should certainly kind of get a step back and just think about what you're doing, because like there is a quote. I don't know who said this, but this is a very good quote, and it's that, and I will probably butcher the quote right now, but it's something like, the worst thing that society has made you to do is to believe that cynics were the good guys, that pessimists were the right ones. It's like, and this is I don't know, I heard this quote from Alex Hormozy, but it's I think it isn't his quote, that pessimists get to be right, but optimists get to be rich. And this is just a kind of like a side note of why, even though, even despite this like propaganda to be negative and pessimistic and negative, why I still think in this positive way, or at least I try to think in this positive way, or even sometimes when things get really bad, I strive to think positively. It is this quote that pessimists get to be right, but optimists get to be rich. And the fact that the world is ruled by optimists, like this is a very interesting sort of concept that not a lot of people actually realize, and probably you don't realize that here. It's like the world is ruled by optimists. All of the inventions and all of the like the technological stuff, you need to have a certain mindset, you need to have a certain belief to produce that kind of stuff, just simply because like if you don't believe in what you're doing, if you don't believe in your craft, if you don't believe in your own capacity to build those things, it's like you won't build them. If you don't believe that something can be achieved, you will not make it. This is one of the this is literally, I think, the title of the first chapter in this book. Let me open this. It's like, oh yeah. So literally, the first chapter in this book is called "Believe You Can Succeed and You Will." Simple as that. It's like, if you don't believe in your own capacity to make great things, it's like you won't do them. This is as simple as it gets. And The whole idea of this book, it is kind of like I would sometimes when you're reading this book, it's not even about like thinking big and thinking in those like reasonably unreasonable concepts, but it's more of like this book is, as I would say, it's more about positive thinking, because there's only one chapter about thinking big in this book, and let's get to it right now. What is the magic of thinking big? Why most people think in very small models, and why most people achieve nothing. This is a very it sounds very airy to talk about like thinking big and thinking in those like large models and like just thinking that you can earn millions and all of this stuff. It's like, look, if you don't think that you deserve to earn, let's just say 10K a month, you won't earn it. You won't simply earn this money. This is a concept that I have carried around since I've read this book, and it is that in every domain in life, just try to strive for the kind of like the most reasonably unreasonable results that you can make. Because look, if we talk about thinking big, it's like it has it's I don't I'm not trying to be like negative right here, but thinking big has its own limits, because like imagine a guy who has been sitting in his mom's basement for the last, let's just say, 15 years, and now as soon as he heard about this concept of thinking big, he made himself a goal to earn, I don't know, 2 million a year in the next 6 months. It's like, this sounds absurd. This is not thinking big. This is just like thinking absurd. This is because like you cannot make 2 million to 2 million euros in a year. You cannot earn this money if you haven't been doing something for the last just like, let's just say, a year or 2 years. It's like, this is just simply not possible. And if you think that it can be done, it's like, no, think more reasonably. But with that being said, this example that I brought up, it's like it is a much more extreme version, because if that same guy who has been sitting in his mom's basement, playing video games all day, eating junk food, would make himself a goal to earn 1K a month, or okay, not 1K a month, but let's just say 2K a month in the next like year or so, that's, to some degree, it's like it is reasonably unreasonable, because like of course this guy has been sitting, like he has been sitting on governmental welfare for the last 15 years, and he doesn't even have any experience to understand how to earn money. And so earning 2K a month for him with this like, I'm not talking about like going to a 9 to 5. I'm talking about in more of this like entrepreneurial sense. It's like if he would make some sort of like a project, or like if he would become an entrepreneur and he would earn 2K a month in the next year, it's like that is going to be a good result, because he doesn't have any experience and he still made it to 2K a month, which is like, it is a pretty good number for a guy who has been sitting in his mom's basement for like since he like became conscious. So that is a pretty reasonably unreasonable thing. This is a phrase that I like: think reasonably unreasonable. It's like your thinking must be big to the degree it's unreasonable for most of the people, but it's still kind of reasonable to, and it is still kind of manageable and achievable to get the results that you want. So when I said that this guy who just learned about the concept of thinking big, he thinks that he can earn 2 million in the next 6 months. Like, this is bullshit. It's like, yeah, this is not reasonably unreasonable. This is just unreasonable. But 2K a month in the next year, it's like that's That's something more reasonable. Maybe not 2K a month, maybe like two and a half if he would think more in like if he would just apply this magic of thinking big. But you get the point. It's like you cannot like think in think in this kind of like phrase that you should think always reasonably and reasonable. So in terms of thinking big, what I found just throughout implementing this rule in my life is that if you just make yourself goals which are above your which are above the social expectations that you have been set to think, it's like those are already big goals. Because for example, um or okay, this is a pretty bad example, but you get the point. It's like if you just go a little bit above the social expectations that you have been set to believe, and by social expectations I mean it's like your normal thinking is pre-controlled by the social rules that were in your environment. Hence why it's like nobody thinks big, because thinking big is honestly, it's like to some degree it's a very, I wouldn't say narcissistic, but it's a very self, not as selfish, but even like it is hard to explain why so many societies don't like this idea of achieving more. Because like and this happens because like this tall poppy syndrome and like the outlier in the field and etc etc. It's like don't be more successful than others, share with ours. Like no, man. It's like with this mindset of being moderate and being like just being average, it's like you're not going to achieve anything. You're not basically, yeah, you might have a good standard of living, you might have like a good baseline, but in order to get above this baseline, it's like you, this is just simply not possible. And that's why I like this idea of thinking big. It's like thinking big to some degree, it's like it is defying the social expectations that have been set upon you. Thinking big means that you will have to defy a lot of the a lot of the ideas that have been already implanted in your mind. And that is a very hard thing to do, but if you can manage to consciously do that, it's like your the return on investment of that mental model is insane. It is absolutely insane. And if I will talk the other concepts from this book that I've learned, it's like mostly what I've learned from this book is about positive thinking, honestly. It is not even learned, it's like I would say recapped. Because of course to some degree I knew all of the benefits of thinking positively and thinking big before, and I knew all of the perils of thinking negatively and thinking small and etc etc. But I've read it at the time where I needed to read it the most, where I need to hear it the most. And yeah, there are chapters in this book like, and I will just like list them about like managing your environment, going first class, like getting the action habit, using goals, thinking like a leader, how to turn defeat into victory. It's like all of this stuff is cool. It's like I, for example, I got a lot from the chapter of how to cure fear, or how to. I think it's called how to get in the action habit. But the main idea of this book is about thinking positively and about thinking thinking in those like large models. This was the main idea that I got from this book. And if you want to read yourself, if I would kind of like give you the kind of like the recommendation to you, I would say yes. It's like it's a good book to read. Some of the chapters are pretty boring because like the book is just written in the way that maybe you will like it. I just don't like the way this book is written. This one thing I just don't like this woo woo like plain way where there's no authenticity, there is no like, there's basically the author just disappears and he talks about like this some of like the stories and the concepts and like this stuff. I just don't like the way this book is written. And for example, as I said, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill is written in the same way. But if we talk about just implementing some of the more positive mental models in your brain, this book makes it work fantastically. And so with that being said, let me plug in something in the end. I've been on self-improvement for 1.5 years right now, and if you really want to maximize the man, if you really want to become the superior version of yourself, I offer coaching. My email is linked down below in the description, and with that being said, I hope this will help you, and see you in the next one.